I started out as a reporter, as a journalist, and I was a copy editor of the Chicago Defender newspaper. And I definitely wouldn't be doing what I do now if I hadn't done that. A lot of people know the name of the Defender. At that time, it was a daily print newspaper. It's, circulated by, for, and about the African American community. It has a kind of a historic role in the Great Migration. It was an amazing place to work. And, I was like, you couldn't imagine a more ignorant person. I grew up in the suburbs of New York. This affluent, like a place, if you imagined white privilege, you would think about the place where I grew up. And so it was like, I had worked with community in college. I worked at the college newspaper. And so I had met all of these editors of Southside community newspapers in the African American community. And it was through one of them I found out about this opportunity at the Chicago Defender. And it was completely eye-opening. I wasn't even there that long. But it was just really, really changed the trajectory for me. So much so that then, so that was my first job straight out of college. And then I went and I worked in this guy who was running for state representative on the southeast side. He's running for alderman on the southeast side of Chicago. And I'm a Gen Xer, and I was going to do the Gen X thing, and I was going to go home and try and find a job on a big metro newspaper or whatever. And I just somehow I got, I was into environmentalism. And this guy was known for that because his area was on the southeast side of Chicago. I went to volunteer on this guy's campaign, and I ended up living in the back room of his house for like the whole summer. So, and I always had been interested in journalism, but also like environmentalism, and it's kind of like the sign of the times, the 1990s, and while I was living in the back room of this guy's house, he had a book by Alton Miller, who was Harold Washington's press secretary. He had written this book about being the press person for Harold Washington when Harold was mayor. I was like, wow, that's a job. You can do public relations like for good guys. So I was hooked, and that was really kind of like how I got interested in this kind of work. And I did end up working at a big metro newspaper outside of Philadelphia for a year or two. And I had completely been ruined for that by working someplace like the Defender, because I realized, the metro newspapers were all, in theory, they're written for like the whole region, but in practice, they were the sort of default audience that every journalist imagined they were writing to was people who, by and large looked like them, who by and large were kind of like middle-class white folks. And it just didn't make too much sense to me. I could just see there was kind of a problem with it. Anyway, so of course I ended up at a nonprofit. And of course, it being nonprofits, people were like, well, let's have Gordon write the press releases. He used to be a reporter, so he must know how. Which I really didn't. But we kind of figured it out along the way, like, wait, if we tell stories in our news releases, journalists will, not just put our name in the news, but they'll actually get out the story that we're trying to tell. So, and that was, more than 20 years ago. That's really what I've been doing. In many ways, that's exactly the only thing that I've been doing ever since. Working with organizations, of course, over the years, the longer you work in nonprofits, especially if you do anything related to communications, of course, fundraising becomes a big part of it. So, in a lot of the work that I do now is around fundraising communications. And one of the places that I spent a lot of time then was Public Narrative. Now it's called, at that time it was called Community Media Workshop. When we just did communications coaching for other nonprofit groups. And so that was a great opportunity to just experience every different kind of organization's communication needs, from, the smallest arts organization or social service or human service group to foundations.